like one-offs that are not gonna be bonded and banded. That's not a verb, but, they're not gonna go out for a ban or to the bond market, but that were like the police department had some of the, in the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 range that might be able to be purchased with 2018 unexpended funds, and I don't know how they've been identified to this point.
So, they're in the budget, but we actually have them on the front sheet. So this is our running list so far.
Is that in here? Do we have a copy of that?
Those are
That's
the,
on the
wa-
back of,
that's in the general fund
Yeah.
summary budget page. Page,
So this is actually, additional money from fund balance that'll roll over to pay for that.
Oh, is that already accounted for? How's that?
Yeah, so these are already in the budget, but then where we usually do 650 from fund balance, then there's another line that says 396,000. So if there's things you want to add to this, we can, and we'll just take it out of fund balance as opposed to, taking it out of the current 19 budget. We'll add more revenue to the fund balance. Rollover.
Now, is this the one-time purpose, the sheet you're talking about, or is this?
Do we actually have that, though?
Yeah, it's in here. So I'm looking at that sheet right now. It's under general fund summary. It's on the back side of the general fund summary sheet. It's the first page with any real numbers in that section. It's the back side of the first page with real numbers. So it says 2019 additional fund balance items for one-time purchases. So these are all currently listed in the 2019 budget. And you're saying they would be good candidates for being paid for out of the 2018 unexpended funds. And right now, we have $396,330 in that list. So all of that money, we are thinking, it wouldn't go out to the bond market for it. It would come out of the general fund. Do we do it at a 2018 or 2019? That's the question.
18 fund balance.
But right now, it's listed in the 2019 budget. We have the option of taking all this out of the 2018 budget, fund balance.
budget was already established on the page before as using 2018 fund balance for these items to be
Oh,
spent.
okay,
in
so we're not, so,
Yeah.
to be
so then
spent
the
in
question
20
is, are there things we can add to this list?
That's what I was hoping you would say.
Okay. So then there are things under the capital projects that are there more one-offs that are not listed on here, right? Like there was some,
Like, for instance,
all of your-
the
wasn't
police
there,
depart-
there was police,
the police vehicles would
Right.
be a good example because those have a 3-year life.
and how much is one of them?
Each one is like 50.
Boom.
There we go.
One of them is, we're done.
One vehicle, that's it.
Right.
Okay.
No, but those were not in the budget to begin with, so
That's
Oh.
our capital
you
plan.
can't say that, you know, that you're gonna bring the tax levy down to, increase down to 0.
Because they would be banned,
Yeah, so you have to.
they would be paid out, but what, I'm sorry. They're not in the
capital
budget?
plan, they're not in the general fund budget. So they're in the capital
That's different.
plan, and, you know, generally, in past years, you know, we would have passed a bond resolution for them, but like
Not
last
for police
year.
vehicles though, right?
Well, I'm talking about before 2017. Last year, a lot of these items were paid for from fund balance. It was like about $700,000 worth of items in the general fund we took from fund balance, like police vehicles, which only have a 3-year life. So that's one of the decisions when we go through these capital plans, because I need to prepare the resolution for adoption before year end to, you know, to appropriate fund balance.
Are there better items to consider that it makes less sense to do it in a 3-year ban? And I don't know what the interest rate is, if that makes sense or not.
Hold on, I just want to be clear. If it's in the capital project, like the capital, if it's a capital project, it's not in the actual general funds.
Correct.
So
That's
all right,
next year's borrowing.
exactly. So you guys have already you have a list of things, like the cameras you already knew, you were not going to put that in the actual budget, because
That's in the budget.
that's in the budget.
But funded
But-
with 18 rollover.
Okay, so so when we're looking at the total of that department, is the cameras a part of the total of that department?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then the revenue source for that is 18
got you.
fund balance additional usage of fund balance.
So you guys would still, so if it's $54,000 that we need to cut, you guys would still have to go through each line to see if there's anything else that you didn't, that you didn't pick up on that could probably be a one-time expense. Is that,
That is true.
okay,
But the very last page of your capital budget is a line that Tom had put together, and it's capital items that are in the general fund.
okay.
Where's that?
So it's the very last page of your capital budget. And you'll see at the top, it says number 7, small capital outlay equipment in operating funds. So that was identified.
That's exactly what we want to talk
Cool,
about, yeah.
cool, great.
So,
This
and,
page here, you can
Yeah.
adjust any way you want.
I have a question. Do we have any type of conservative projection as to where we're going to end up at the end of this year? Do you have a ballpark?
with unexpended funds that we
Yeah,
would
in other words,
responsibly take advantage of?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, if we look at the worst-case scenario between now and the end of the year, you know,
You know, I'm always going to say that because we're self-insured on health insurance, I can't give you any answer on health insurance because.
well, I'm not talking about health, I mean,
Right, but that's a factor.
Okay, well,
You know,
so-
last year, health insurance costs were low, and we brought a lot of money.
where are
into the
we,
general.
okay, so since that's the largest liability that we could potentially have, then where are we year-to-date with the budgeted amount for self-insurance?
I don't have the number for self-insurance, but I was looking more at some of the other things, expenses in the general fund, like, I know that we have a lot of vacant positions and things like that. I thought for sure that, you know, we should be able to, you know, bring back $1 million on the appropriation side of the 2018 operations in the fund balance.
Just for salaries? Or is that combined department budgets and salaries?
Yeah,
Excluding insurance?
that could be anything, you know, it could be contractual expenses, like, you know, if we don't spend the contingency, you know, that's part of it.
How much do we have in contingency?
It's generally
300,
and-
right?
It's about $300,000.
How much of it have we used this year?
Technically, I don't think we've used any. But, you know, there are things like the,
Didn't
you
you do
know,
the police contract? Didn't you take that out of contingency?
well, the police contract was in a prior year.
Oh, okay, all right.
But like the fire department had a major expense on one of their vehicles.
Right.
And for the, you know, it was early in the year, and I asked them to please, you know, take it out of their operating budget since they had sufficient appropriations. But, you know, when we talk about their budget, you know, they remind me that, like, that's one of the items that we were gonna come back to the village board to take from, like, contingency, unless we could find it somewhere else in their budget, like maybe heat expenses or something like that.
We bought a boiler too.
40,000.
Right, there was a boiler, and a year ago, one of the fund balance uses was a very large DPW truck. It was $125,000 approximately, and this year, Paul asked if he could spend another, it's somewhere around $50,000 for the salt spreader and the plow, and the other parts for the truck, and he'd like to take that from the 2018 budget, so, you know, that's.
This is the week to ask for that. Salt spreaders and plows are very popular this week. We will not say no.
Don't we know that?
Don't we know?
But we did appropriate the $350,000 for street paving this year with the board resolution, and we also set aside $25,000 for the roof repairs at 200 Main Street. But we do have some excess revenues this year. Sales tax should be up about $300,000 above
Nice.
our revenue estimate, and court fines are going to be about $150,000. So,
Wow.
you know,
Above what we anticipated?
yes.
So it's $450,000 of revenue that we weren't anticipating?
More than what was budgeted, yes, yes. Sales
right.
tax was, it was a surprise because it had been, so, it had been level. It hadn't seemed to
Now,
respond.
we get, our sales tax is paid to us from the county from some mysterious formula. Well, it's not really mysterious, it's just nobody can explain it very well to me. Did we do anything to earn that, or is that just more people went shopping in the county?
I think
Across
it's more people went shopping, and a lot of it could be possibly related to the increase in the cost of gasoline. Gasoline's gone up the past year, so that means more sales tax revenues as well.
Okay. Okay. So,
So all these items that I mentioned, excess revenues, appropriating fund balance for some of these capital projects and regular savings, I still think that we're probably going to have at least $1 million going back into fund balance at the end of 2018.
that's excellent. Then it would be irresponsible for us to raise the tax rate. Right? Okay, good.
Okay.
So what do you need from us? I think.
Well, I think we need to find out what things we're gonna spend money on in this year's,
Capital budget?
excess, right? What are the things we could take out of capital that we might be,
Well-
there's all the stuff out of the small capital outlays that,
No, I think from what I just heard is there's going to be money. So if we're short 54,000, that there'll be enough revenue from this year to cover that. And with respects to the small capital lines, that line within the capital budget, those are reoccurring expenses. So
So I would like to go back, while we're talking about this, I mean, I know there are some accounting practices that you're striving to improve that make the auditors and the rate determining people happy. And we want to, we're in good shape financially, so we want to show ourselves off as the very most responsible municipality we possibly can. The general fund is the fund that we talk about the most. But we did have a pretty significant conversation about the water fund. And the biggest single infrastructure project that we are going to undertake for a generation is the filtration plant. And we talked about how, in order to keep the water fund balance in a responsible spot, when we begin that project in earnest in the next year or so, we're going to be raising people's water rates. If you go through all the things in the water fund, and when we borrow and when we don't, and how much of a percentage of this expense is paid for out of the water fund or not, right now, I'm concerned that we have been depleting the water fund at too rapid a rate. And I feel that we should reconsider how we're spending some of the money in the water fund. Whether that means borrowing where we can, or maybe adjusting the amount of things that could be justified in general fund, as a general fund expense, and not taking that out of the water fund.
so then if we do that,
And still stay at zero.
that's interesting, man.
We do. I just sat here and then heard a whole, we need to find $36,000. Well, here's $450,000 in revenue we didn't know about. Like, okay, well, I'm really concerned. I do not want to raise people's water rates. And frankly, if anybody in the town is watching, they don't think that's fair either. But nobody's watching, right?
No. It's on YouTube.
It will be now.
Well, they ought to be, and we have a responsibility. We really do.
And I think that you bring up a really good point about looking at everything all together and how that all fits with your philosophies of where you want to be with fund balances and how we want to spend those monies. There are ways, we just need to look at it from a comprehensive perspective, and that would be a really good, that would be the only thing, like on a work session or something, where we could really lay out at the end of the year where we are, how much fund balance we have in the general fund, where we are in the water fund, the sewer fund, the Section 8 fund. So these are all the funds that we have, And what does that look like, and where are we trending? And I think that's an excellent discussion to have with the board, so that you can actually make decisions on where we are with money.
That's what we're doing right now.
But it's not what we're,
I mean, from a.
We're gonna have to determine the water rate.
We are, but not this year. I mean,
Eh,
we budgeted 5% increase for water this year. And it was 5%
That's
the
fine,
last
but
couple
we've
years.
also, if we look at all the expenses that we've talked about today, the majority of them are drawing from 3 funds.
Right.
Or I shouldn't say the majority, many of them are drawing from 3 funds. Are there some changes that maybe we should be adjusting?
There are that I would recommend, but I'm not prepared to do that right now.
Okay. But could you do it in this
Absolutely.
budget cycle before we finalize the budget for December 5th?
Yes,
Okay,
so,
okay.
I
Yeah,
get
I
it
mean,
ready
it
for
seems,
Wednesday.
it seems to me that there are a lot of employees, that work in the village where
Uh-huh.
a percentage of their salaries and everything else, come from water or sewer, or they're
Right.
allocated to the general fund,
Right.
and maybe for a year, maybe we could carry that just in the general fund, so that those expenditures wouldn't happen in the other funds. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, that might,
I think she's talking about long-term. I think,
Well,
are you,
Yeah.
are you asking?
Debbie thinks that she can go through and sort of identify, that would be helpful. If you can identify some of the things that are in, because we have the ability, there's many things that can be charged to different funds. And we've made a decision over the years to charge certain things to the water fund that maybe at this point, because we know we're gonna have a huge expense coming from the water fund,
Right.
maybe we lighten up on that a little bit so that we don't have to see a big spike in the water rate in
Right.
the coming years. That was philosophically what I was saying. I don't know what those items are, what the number is.
Yep.
I think that Tom said a week ago or so that he feels we have gone over, I'm not using the right words, but we went too far, I think. Sorry. That we need to reevaluate that. I somehow feel like you actually had an amount in mind, that we went too far in drawing on the water fund and not.
I don't think that was my conversation.
Oh.
No, I think what you might be recalling was, because there were, some projects, some particular projects, some of them happened
Oh.
more
Like-
quickly than we usually do,
like
and so
the-
they took,
The
drew
Gordon
directly
Avenue
from. Yes.
project
Okay,
was
you're right.
from fund balance, that's too late to do
Which is
anything about.
unusual.
But the
Right.
Route 9 water main, that's
Right,
about $1 million.
that's it, right, there's the water,
Now,
okay.
that
That's actually what
hasn't-
prompted the conversation.
That's something that, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think it's too late to pass a bond resolution, because that's like a 20-year life project. But we'd only, rush to use fund balance in order to try to apply for a grant, so.
Which is another one of the reasons we want to keep that fund balance healthy,
So
because
you
that's a
think
system we have to
that
preserve.
by the time we have to vote on this, you're gonna be able to make recommendations about how to move through these buckets?
I can make a recommendation of what I think is probably things that we can remove from the water fund, but then it's gonna go into the general fund, and then we're gonna have to talk about use of fund balance to pay for those. Then we'll have to look at how quickly that draws down your fund balance in the general fund, and we would really need some direction from you as to where you wanna be with fund balance as a percentage of the general fund budget. So I don't know what it is here in New York. I'm used to 12 to 15% of your general fund budget. I don't know what it is in New York.
They used to use that percentage until like the tax cap took effect and also the recession. And now it's not unusual for them to be saying that 25%
Okay.
fund balance isn't excessive.
Okay.
And so, and your recommendations are gonna be able to prove, so with those recommendations, then you'll be able to anticipate keeping water rates the same or stable? Because that is the purpose of this, of shifting
I don't
things
think the
around.
water rates are gonna
I
stay
don't think they
stable.
will,
We're
but it might
talking
not be
about
years from
issuing a, debt that's gonna increase the water fund budget by, close to $2 million a year in additional debt service costs that have to be paid back annually.
So
Or maybe $1.7 million or $1.8 million.
So for me, because it seems like this conversation, and you can please weigh in because you started the conversation. This conversation about changing how we pay for things, particularly among 3 funds, that it was you wanted to do it to anticipate or to prevent a spike in water rates. All right,
Right.
and so in your analysis, you'll be able to show how much money we're going to be saving with respects to water rates by the time, before we have to vote on December
Yeah,
5th?
we can give you a number of what we could possibly move to the general fund, but again, you're depleting over here, you're depleting
Yeah.
over here. And so it really has to be balanced out with whatever your goals and objectives are.
I would have said it, minimize the increases is more accurate than saving. In other words,
Right.
instead of this, maybe it's this, but it's not, it's not
Right,
flat.
it's not gonna be flat.
It's minimizing the increase needed.
Yeah, we've been doing the 5% pretty consistently to try and build up the fund balance in the water fund. But what we learned last week was that we're anticipating a 10% increase in water rates. And that's something that will be really hard for people to
Right.
accommodate. So I'd like to minimize that number.
You know,
10% is gonna happen in a couple of years.
It depends.
What happen next year?
Well,
Yeah, I was.
yeah, again, it's, we're gonna have to map out when we think our borrowings are going to happen.
Okay.
Because we don't have to borrow the whole thing, $30 million up front. We're gonna borrow to cash flow this project, and then it'll continue to roll over until the project's complete, which is 2 to 3 years. And then we do the final borrowing. I mean, it'll already be in our payback from the band, but we're gonna have to map it out and see where it goes. And see what the rates, how that,
well, the other thing I was going to mention is just this other extraordinary expense in the water fund related to the mixers that we're putting into the, you know,
Right.
and that's another.
And that's
I mean,
critical. We have
that's
to
a-
do that.
Well, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like we're not going to do that, but that's going to have an impact on the water fund balance because we have to spend that money now, right?
Right.
We're going to have to at least band it and then possibly, I mean, I don't know, would we borrow to pay for it, or, I mean.
That could be another 20-year life project that probably should be bonded. To pay it off over the life.
Yeah.
But we'd short-term borrow first so we get the total project cost, and then that's when
yeah.
you go out to the long-term loan.
Right,
Right,
right.
that-
But, I'd still be presenting a bond resolution for that project, and with the anticipation that even if it's initially borrowed with a one-year note, it's going to have to be converted into a long-term serial bond.
Well, you know, before, while you guys had stepped away, I was talking to Dale about our, our fund balance, which is, I mean, we're looking north of $12 million in, unappropriated fund balance. So, and with the auditors coming in and saying, you've got too much money, the idea, or one of the things that I was asking was, well, maybe we set up some kind of a special purpose for some portion of that money, and maybe that special purpose is to carry some of the costs from the water fund into the general fund. I don't know, does that make sense,
yeah,
or?
I think that I actually like the mayor's idea of taking some of the cost away that we normally charge to the waterfront and charge it to the
Right.
general fund.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to pay pay for that somehow, right?
We could use the
Yeah, I
fund
mean,
balance. for
yeah, we
that.
could use the fund, I'm just saying that
Right.
that's a purpose where you would project out a dollar amount that we would, to kind of smooth out the expenses from the water fund that we had parsed out between the rest of the costs of the village, so.
If you move those salaries out, is it still gonna be a 5% increase in the water rates as projected?
Yeah.
For this year, yeah, because it's just a matter of, because we've depleted our water fund balance so much, this will just help us build it back up, so that the next time we have an emergency, we've got the money there, and so that in the out years, instead of going a 10% increase, we'll be able to say, okay, maybe we'll do a 7 or 8% increase, and we expect that means we're gonna draw down on our fund this year, so that the next year, it's still not, to keep it from going to that huge, that's the whole point of continuing to have increases with the water rates over the years, is so that we can borrow against it for emergencies and to temper the impact of the major borrowing when it happens.
So I don't think you're going to see the finance department's budget being charged 100% to the general fund. We still provide a lot of services.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Water and sewer. It's just like maybe instead of a 35% charge out of salaries to the water fund, maybe 30%.
Exactly, those kind of things, yes. How can we, right-size it for moving forward with the water fund demands that we're going to be placing on it?
We'll work on that for you.
Thanks. And then, there's other things that that's not what my eyes usually go to. I don't usually look to see exactly what fund each thing is being drawn from. You are going to have to, lean on your expertise to help identify where there's some changes that could appropriately be made.
Yeah, and do you think that maybe we could see if Hazen and Sawyer might want to help us out with some
Yeah.
type of rate model to
Awesome.
pay for the filtration plant?
Yeah, they're great. They're the pros. If any advice they have would be helpful.
We'd used a different company, Mount Kisco, when we built the water filtration plant, and they gave us a lot of different suggestions as to how to pay for the debt service, rather than just relying on what we're doing right now by just using, increasing the user rates. Okay.
Any expert advice is welcome to help us do our job better. We don't have to listen to it, but we can listen. We don't have to follow it, but yes. Thank you. Okay, so is there anything more from the manager's office that we should be focusing on?
Not really. So my budget looks lower
Pay no
because I
attention to
took
that
out
one behind the
IT.
curtain.
I moved out Craig's salaries out of the manager's budget, and we actually put it in the IT budget so that it could be easily identified. So it's just another that I made. And there is some money in the budget this year for some consultants as well. The mayor. But the only thing that's really in there for me is dues, subscriptions. Those are ones that we have, NICOM dues, Historic Hudson River Towns, Westchester Municipal Planning Federation, local governments for sustainability, Westchester Municipal Officials Association, Arts on the Hudson, those kind of dues. I did reduce the amount of money that I put in there for training for my schooling, because there's just no way I can take classes during budget season, so I can only do 3 a year. So I reduced the amount of budget for that. But out of my budget, that's about it.
If 3 or 4 years off from the WMOA dinner, that's nice.
What's that?
The WMOA dinner, we're done with that for a few years.
I know, yay! Yeah, so, in the board's budget, you'll see a lot of the requests that were put in by Quantel and Rita.
Are we the only two that put them in?
None of mine are reflected, the ones that you wrote down at the end of our meeting, like a
So
month
if
ago.
you didn't send me an email, I probably forgot about them. So,
Show us where you, I'm having trouble keeping up. We're saying a lot of words.
page 2
of the mayor's budget.
is the board budget. So the mayor has a different budget,
Yeah.
which is a couple pages later, after court. But
So, page 2 of 15, that's what I'm looking at here, board request, after-school
Right.
board request training. Oh, what, wow, my, woo, 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 woo.
So the first one was the Arts Committee. So last year, we had put $7,000 for the Arts Committee to use into contingency, and so it's listed here now so that you can
How
find
much did
it.
they use? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
We think about $1,000 so far.
Well, aren't we at the end of the year?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't know of any other outstanding expenses at this point, so.
And what did they end up using for? Because there was a lot of ideas when they first came to for the request. They were doing
Well,
a concert series, and they wanted
Well,
money
they didn't,
fronted. and-
we didn't need a backstop for any new events that were set up this year, because of, well, we didn't really do anything for them, but the Austin Jazz Festival ended up becoming self-funding,
Right.
so it took off on its own. I think most of the monies were for networking events for artists. We were working to do some collaborative stuff with multidisciplinary art activity, and I know we're going to be planning something early next year for a couple of those events. I don't have, I mean, they met with you and gave you their budget presentation, right?
They did. And
yeah.
it was the same as last year. They want to do some advertising, they want to do some online, they have an online presence. So we'll be picking up the funding, I think it's $60 a quarter for the online presence that they use. And then they wanted to do some special projects which were gonna cost some money.
So the 2018 actuals, so how could it be 7,000, the actuals?
Yeah, that's not really,
Say one, right?
The 7,000 was budgeted in contingency, and then we were moving money to,
I think they're looking at
which one?
Yeah.
this header
Yes.
pertaining to this column.
Oh.
Yeah, it's probably
And it
not in
doesn't-
there.
No,
not-
that's the unit
yeah.
cost.
That's all that was
Sorry.
actually requested.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so what has been spent on this?
$400,
How do we know that?
because if you look
That's
on
on-
the prior page, it's
Oh, this one.
$400, yeah, for actuals.
Okay. So
Yeah.
these numbers are
See
not
that?
realistic. You can't just carry numbers over. I mean, any of them.
Right,
These are all new.
yeah.
These were submitted.
These are new board initiatives
By you
for
guys.
2019.
Okay, so it's just that the header is wrong. It shouldn't say
Well, that-
2018 actuals.
It's how it carries over from one page to another.
Okay, but it's a misrepresentation for this
Right.
page. So let's just cross off that little header and say 2019 requested.
Okay.
Okay. I feel better.
So they had requested 7,000. They have a list of items that they want to spend the money on. I don't think that they were organized enough this year to use the money.
So how are we doing this? Because there are things on here I don't agree with. They're not my things. How are we having a conversation about this? Are we having it now? What are we doing? Are we reading all of these?
I think
'Cause you're
so,
not
yeah.
making a decision. It's not even your
So
recommendation.
these have come from different places, so how about the people who are, responsible for the request explain what they're interested in and help us understand why we should fund it?
Okay.
Mrs. Bazemore, you
Yours are
should
not
start.
on, right?
First.
Yeah, mine's aren't.
I didn't have any change of plans, so.
What did you add?
Yeah, you needed to.
I do,
you wanted
I
a
do.
list by a certain date.
Just,
Does that help?
because I told her on the 24th, I just forgot to email
This
you
is the
this
email
sheet.
that was sent out,
Yes,
right?
yes.
There you go.
How much is it total?
8 grand.
8,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Just write it at the bottom.
Okay, are you going up first?
Yeah. So basically, when Debbie asked us, what kind of programs would we like to see in fund balance this year, I don't know if you, of course, we get the Westchester Business magazine emailed to us, and so I saw that there was a program that was done in Yonkers by the Yonkers IDA, in which they had an apprenticeship program. We've had a lot of conversations about economic development, and the first recommendation from Kevin Durkis Housing Needs Assessment, there's reference to, of course, economic development, but also making sure that all members of our community actually thrive, right? So that people who may be low income can actually gain the skills to step into a middle class career. So I contacted Pathways to Apprenticeship. They have done a program in Portchester. They have done a program, of course, in Yonkers. And New Rochelle currently is interested in this particular program. Basically, how the program works is that in order for you to become a part of a union, you have to do an apprenticeship program. And so this program actually gives the participants the actual skills, definitely the soft skills, some construction skills, some OSHA training, in order to ensure that when there are jobs, that they can that they can actually step into them. P2A has been around. Of course, there's a number of within this you see a list of partners. On the second page, if you just turn it around, and so this is generally my request. It is not something. I will say that if the board does actually agree to fund this request, it's definitely not something that will be expended the first part of the year. This is largely contingent upon there is some move in the county to require the IDA to have, the Westchester IDA, which we fall under, to have a local hire and a local apprenticeship program. We know that we have had developers who have come here and who have asked us for pilots and to grant pilots. This is something that I see definitely as being a one-time expense. I did have some words with Senator Carlucci, hopefully going forward, if this is something that the board wants to consider, that this won't necessarily be something that the board has to fund, but there might be some state funding for that. But also, just in general, when we are making deals with developers, it's important that we actually, to the best of our abilities, make sure that if they're getting a tax break, that members of our communities are actually benefiting with at least jobs in an apprenticeship program. This particular organization, there's a couple of things. You at least have to be 18. You have to have a high school diploma, but it's not something that is just limited to normally like 18 to 25. This can be any able-bodied person. If you were previously incarcerated, they actually, 60% of their participants currently between New York City and, of course, Westchester have been formerly incarcerated. So this is a way to really get people who normally wouldn't have the opportunity to actually gain employment. You had mentioned earlier, Mayor, about the reason that we do our community programs is to make sure that we won't have to increase our police department. Well, I would largely say, yes, of course we do that to make sure that our children can become great adults, but there are some adults that we have in this community who probably do need a second chance. And again, this is just, this can just be a pilot. I'm not looking I'm not really looking for to come back to this board for this request, but I'm asking that we at least begin to have a conversation about particularly when we talk about development, particularly when we talk about the kind of buildings and projects that come in this community. We should be encouraging local hire, or at least an apprenticeship program, but we cannot do that unless we have the infrastructure in place. So
We
that's
actually have a law that there's an apprenticeship program required for municipal projects of a
Yes.
certain size.
Okay.
So, I mean, there is already
Okay.
a need for
Yeah.
people to have this level of skill
Yes.
to be able to take advantage of it if we want to foster that locally,
Yeah.
which is the intention.
yes,
So,
But you highlighted the pilot situation.
yes,
It's actually, why is the public subsidizing your project, and what's our
Absolutely.
benefit from it, right? And actually, holding them accountable
Absolutely.
for if they actually follow through after the construction and pilot's issued, which I think is a very important point.
and let me say this, that the P2A works with local unions. They are not going to. We can put the funds aside, but if there's no work, they are not going to actually come here and actually do the training. So this is something that if we're just moving in tandem, which hopefully the county government will move, that if something happens this year, that we'll actually be prepared to be able to take advantage of that. And now that you're even talking about some of the public works projects that we do have, maybe this is a conversation, because again, we can have a local hiring or apprenticeship program, but if we're not training our local residents to do so, or giving them the opportunity, then that law actually means nothing.
it means you have to hire union labor, that's all, because they're the only ones that have an apprenticeship program, but this takes it to a whole nother level. So I philosophically agree with everything you said. I'm not sure, this is the first I've ever heard of it. So it's $100,000 that's put in the budget for this program that we're just learning about. I don't really know how it would. What are you really asking for? I mean, maybe you're asking for us, it'd be really nice if we put $100,000 in the budget and we'll just make it happen. But I don't know enough of the steps to really make it happen, even if the $100,000
So
is there.
I mean,
So tell me the
yeah,
likely
listen,
pathway forward.
to be quite frank, if you put $100,000 in the budget today, tomorrow, like today, and we pass the budget, we're still going to have to come. If they're coming to us, and we're still going to have to do an MOU. We're still going to have to pass a resolution. For a community this size, is it likely that we're going to get 20 participants, right? Like that whole process takes time. Like that, it's literally going to the community, setting up with different community members. And if we find out that we don't have 20 or at least 10 people who are willing to take advantage of the project, they're not coming. You understand what I mean? So the number is, there is a budget. It's about 4,000, a little over $4,000 per person. There's a stipend, people have a stipend, but ideally, it's gonna be a long time before, if it's granted, again, we're gonna have to come back, like, these people are gonna have to come before the board, and there actually has to be the work. So if the county doesn't move on the Westchester IDA, and making sure that there's an apprenticeship program locally, then the likelihood of us actually ever expending these funds is not likely, because, again, I mean, unless we're gonna build a project unless there's gonna be a project here in the next year or something, there's actually not gonna be a placement, right? Because this particular organization works in tandem with unions. If there's no work,
But if there is a big project on the horizon, those things don't happen overnight
Yeah.
anyway. So that would be the time.
Exactly.
To figure out how to move this forward and do it in conjunction with any approvals for a big project of
absolutely,
that kind.
yeah,
And you also mentioned that there could be state funds available for
yes,
this.
for going forward.
It's not, you're saying there's not state funds for this yet?
Not right now. I mean, we would have to talk to Senator Carlucci and those kind of things to see if this is something.
It seems like it'd be, I mean, because
Yeah.
it's jobs,
It's
so
workforce
there,
development.
yeah, it seems like there would be grants or some sort of.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is that we take the first step, and then,
So what is the first step?
to actually fund this initiative.
Put $100,000 in the budget?
Just put $100,000 in the budget.
Oh, my lord, okay. Next. Who else wanted to comment on this resolution?
Before
Talk about your 7,000 and your.
Oh, yes.
Wait, let's
why don't
keep
let's-
the,
okay,
it's
why
a
don't
really
you-
interesting
Yeah.
topic, I'm just not sure where to take it.
should we do all the requests per trustee, or should we just?
Well, I mean, this,
Does anybody else have anything more to say? This is the biggest one.
Sure.
And there's a lot here.
So I also am very supportive. This is just, hey Debbie, what is our we have a policy, any contracts over a certain amount have to go off RFP. Would this fall under that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But, I mean,
So we need an RFP for it, okay.
25,000, Dale, is that it? Tom?
Well, except it's professional services.
But this is a training program, though. This is a different program, so this isn't a construction project. You're gonna work on a construction project,
yes.
But we're not talking about your
but
money.
they would have to get hired on by the construction
Yeah.
company.
You're talking.
Right.
Yeah.
Is, this doesn't, we don't usually do job training as a local government. I'm sure there's certain city governments or other levels of government that do. It seems like the type of thing that a nonprofit agency would have the skill set for, but we might be able to partner with or facilitate. No?
Yeah, but
Like a chamber or an IFCA or
yeah,
something
but
that
yeah,
talks
it-
about
but-
job training.
But the money has to come from somewhere. That's
our match?
This is 100,000, but is there a match? I mean, is this
No,
a
this is-
match to something, or is this
No.
100%
This is
funded?
This is fully funded, right?
funded.
Right, so that's my issue. I don't think you just put 100,000 into a budget on, a 2-hour notice of what it is by one trustee who looked into it. It's not appropriate. It's also not appropriate for us to throw $100,000 into a budget without somebody else co-funding it with us. Now, it feels like you want to put a placeholder so that we can work on it during the year. If it's not in the budget, how will we work on it? Well, a lot of people walk in here and say, don't worry, the county will match it. We just went through one of these. It's very hard to stop projects once you funded for them, because now you're the bad guy that said, well, okay, so, yeah, you sat here and said the state will do it, Carlucci, but we don't control any of that stuff. So my question is, why do we have to budget $100,000 for something that a relatively large-sized city has done, but nobody like us? So you want to be innovative. Okay, A, not a heck of a lot of information. B, unless somebody else steps up to this, it's like pulling straws out of a haystack. It's just, given the things that we want to do, to throw $100,000 on a, I'm sure Carlucci will come in, well, I don't know if he's going to come in on it. So I think that most of these should be partnerships, private-public partnerships, some sort of other organizations a step up. I don't know if there's an option here to do, I hate to use the word pilot, because we actually have all agreed that we're not actually doing pilots for a while. That was a whole big discussion we had a few months ago. So we can't use that as, and when we do deals with development, because we already said, we just had this conversation about pilots, that we're not agreeing to pilots for a while. So, is there a $50,000 piece to this, a $25,000?
I mean, listen,
Is there like,
a
is
$50,000
there something we can try and see where it goes? I just feel like, I don't, like,
So,
where
I mean,
are we with this?
$50,000 is 10 people.
Right,
That-
and
that's-
that's not enough?
And, well, we can do 10 people.
There's no other organizations that do this too.
So, again, the organizations that have done it is Don Bosco's in Port Chester. Of course, the Yonkers IDEA has done this. We don't actually have our own IDA, so if
Right.
Peekskill wants to do a particular program like this, they can do a program like that. New Rochelle, and of course, the numbers we're talking about, this budget line would probably, most likely would be $1 million in a place like New Rochelle, just trying to get the amount of people that they're trying to affect.
So are you saying New Rochelle is doing something like
They're
this, or
looking,
they're
so
not?
the reason I said that, they're looking to do it because, again, this particular non-for-profit is partnered up with other labor unions. They're not gonna come, I can ask them to come tomorrow, right? But because there are actual no jobs or any places to place people, they wouldn't do it.
So
Right.
they mostly do places where there is a capacity opportunity. In other words, there's projects, they're looking for people, let's train people so they can work on these projects. We don't have those projects, but we want to train people so that they will work on projects, even though they may not be in Austining.
Yeah, so again.
Is that where you- I mean, I'm asking, that's like a question mark at the end of
So
that.
yes, so if, for example, if the county IDA makes a policy to do local hire,
Right.
then anyone who is trained here would actually be eligible to work in any of the projects within Westchester County. It wouldn't be limited to just Austining.
Right. So, okay. If the county doesn't do
If the
it,
county doesn't do it, then this budget line won't move.
Do we know if this is a valid municipal expense? Do we know that?
I don't know at this point. I mean, it's workforce development, so,
Right.
yeah.
Is this, do we have, is this in the budget currently? Debbie?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we.
Next Bismarck item, or?
And then the other one I have is just it's another after-school program from Fashion Exchange. Basically, it's a program that is geared towards, it can be from 4th grade up to about 17 years old. It's $7,000. Essentially, it is, if this particular program is geared towards younger kids, there's field trips, there's sewing, there's modeling. It's pretty much a basic
What's the organization that will be,
Fashion Exchange.
where are they located?
They are primarily out of, I think they're in the city, but the person lives in Croton.
how did you come across this?
This is someone I've known for quite some time. They've been asking me to, they want to do a project in the village.
Are they an Austining resident?
They're
they're-
Croton.
They're a Croton
Yeah.
resident, okay, so it's not one of our constituents, it's someone in Croton that has
Yeah.
this. Okay, I only asked this, there are a number of these programs, they're fabulous. Never heard of this one, but there are a number of these kind of things. They all have different ages. The question is, should we approve this, but not with this company?
Oh,
Because
that's-
we
yeah.
should, I mean, that's my
Yeah,
question.
oh, absolutely.
There
I'm-
are a number of these, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all different sizes, shapes, and forms. Some are nonprofit, some are for-profit, blah, 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 blah. It's a great idea. I think it's fabulous. I'm just not comfortable with handpicking
I'm
the company that does it, but I sort of like the idea because I've seen it in action. Some of them work with universities, actually, locally, so it's really cool. It sounds a little low, actually.
yeah, that's
7,000?
that's what I said. I was like,
I would have preferred an Austining company of some sort. That's who we represent, actually. But I personally know these programs and love them. Just think that it's a low price, and we need to be careful about who we do this with, actually.
I'm a big fan of this particular ask, just because you've been hearing me say this for months now. When it comes to and communities that care, when it comes to programming for teenagers, whether it's in the form of an after-school program or it's something that Austining has been struggling with and still is till this day, and that actually does fall into the realm of Parks and Recreation. So I do see us having a role in that, and the fact that they focus on teens is great. Would they be using our venues though? Whatever the price is, or whoever the vendor is, they'd be using our space, right? Like at the rec
ideally,
or some
yeah,
public
ideally,
space. Okay.
So, you didn't research this company a lot. Somebody came to you and said, "This is something I have." Have you seen them in action? Have you worked with them?
I mean, I've seen, of course, they have a promotional piece and everything like that.
Okay.
So, they've done a lot of work in Hudson School District. Yeah, so.
Okay.
So you do trust them? Sorry.
So you don't object to us
I absolutely.
saying, this is a nice after-school idea
Yeah.
that we currently don't have. I'd like to introduce this concept. We will maybe put it out to bid. I'm not married to
Okay.
this, but they'll be part of
Absolutely.
the deal. And I'd like to budget as a trustee because it works with a concept, although Bill should really have a say about what goes on. I mean, it's like a little bit of an odd, the tail and the dog. I don't know who's managing what, but they have to sort of, if it is, to your point, through the community center, then that's a part of that.
Are these people that come in and work with our current students that are in after school, or is it a whole separate program?
It sounds like a close program, right?
Then we don't have the space. Because our after-school program is full, and every room that we have is full. And so we would not have a location for them to be in at the community center, so we'd have to find another location.
We have to plan for it, yeah. But I just want to, I get your point of not, but you as elected official can make a recommendation and say, no, I do want them because I like them and I know them. And
Absolutely.
so I just want to, I don't want you to change your mind just because, I asked you or she asked you to. That's just our opinions. But you do have the ability. I just want you to advocate what you want to advocate for. I mean, yeah, we're compromising and talking here, but you. It sounded like at first that you do know her.
No, I do know.
Beyond your conversation, you actually know the program and
Yeah.
what they do, and to just point of clarification, a lot of contracts and programs that we do are from out of town that are non-Austining residents that we spend taxpayer money on, like a lot of them. So it's just to clarify that point.
Yeah, I think he knows how to speak for himself, and I think my point is, are you married to this, or are you?
I mean, listen,
It sounded
I mean-
like you like the idea, we should do this idea. We should-
my goal is to if it's funded, it can happen. If it's not funded, it can't happen.
And these fashion things are a combination of people in the industry and people who help people who want to enter the industry. And they're great after-school programs because they're very targeted. They're not socioeconomic based, so you mix everybody up.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic. It gives them presence. I don't think it's a one-time aspect. These kind of programs tend to not have traction the first year. They oftentimes do need a couple years till they get known, till people come. Because one of the goals is that people who are in the business actually come and see what they're producing and all that. So I'm all for it. I just don't like the idea of any trustee just saying, I know this person, I want to use them. That's my only point.
Okay.
If you're open to the other, they may still be. And I don't know if it's the community center, by the way. I mean, there might be a retail environment that would like to
Absolutely.
be a private-public sponsor. The chamber might be interested in a private-public
Church, schools.
sponsorship. I don't know if the school has room, but let's assume that
Yeah, that
our
might.
businesses
Oh, sure.
might be very interested in this, and
Yep.
a local college might be. We don't have one in Ossining, but in
We
the
do.
area. So I'm asking, you,
WCC.
if that's what you're open to, I'm in
Yeah.
support of it. As
Yeah.
long as it's, for me, that's,
Okay.
I just
That's
think
the
7,000 is
7,000.
too
I
much.
know, like I
I
said,
think we're under budget.
yeah.
So Rika wants to put in $10,000 for an after-school program for teenagers focused on the fashion industry. Now, I just want,
Is it teenagers? Wait a second, did you say?
It is from, the program has run from between people who are in fourth grade up to, up
okay,
to 17.
okay, so tweens and teens.
Yeah, it can be,
Oh.
yeah.
It's fine.
And my only question about it would be, I have no doubt that there are people who would have an interest in this, but have we spoken to the schools or any educators about what, I have no idea what the after-school programs are for anybody with this interest. I can tell you all about soccer and baseball, but I can't tell you anything about anybody with an interest in design and fashion. And if there are courses in the high school that will lend themselves to this, or if there's,
That I'm not aware of.
I can tell you that where I work, there's a huge interest in this. There is a growing interest of boys and girls, by the way, and it's all because of the Project Runway thing and the universities and, you know, all sorts of stuff. It's part of a training and a business and a mentoring. It's not just learning. The biggest obstacle was buying sewing machines. They're expensive, really expensive. Not even the space is the issue. So there might be some of that work, but as I think you're trying to do is let's put a stake in the ground and then get more information.
and you're
see
saying
if-
$10,000 is more, makes more sense
And
than
I think
seven.
it's a multi-year. I mean, I like it. I'm with you. I just think that it's naive to tell taxpayers that's a one-time because it does require, the first year is all about building and what ages, blah, 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 blah.
Okay,
But
so
I'm in support of it. I don't know about other people.
I think I'm hearing that there's support for this program. It should not be in the trustee budget. It was a trustee asks, which is why it's here. It should go in the recreation budget, because this is an extension of recreation programming, similar to what we do with the Beams program.
Yeah, it's similar, actually. It's a good.
It's very, and I am very supportive of that general philosophy that we are doing, you know, we have wonderful facilities, and we are trying to make the most of them and utilize them as much as possible, but then we've got a big community, and we can go beyond when we have these outside agencies that can do it.
The
And
only,
we can further our mission by making
the
use of
only
other
question
resources.
is that when Bill comes up with ideas, he knows, like, people, you need people to run with this. Unless you're planning to do it because you brought it in, I'm not being funny. This is something you want to do. We are going to have to find somebody to lead this, so it might be that organization or others, but that's an important, that is a crucial part, so I'm just gonna say it's not like a swim instructor, it's somebody, it's different than what we've done, but I think that's exciting. That's not I'm just saying, we do need somebody for that.
We do need to figure out, because like Beams is really the template we have to go on for that. And that's being organized
Right.
by established entities in our community. It's communities that care, working with the library, we're funding it. We're not advertising for it, we're not hosting it in our facilities, but we're funding it and we're facilitating it, we're enabling it to happen because it furthers our mission. In this case, it seems likely that we would want Bill to have some oversight for people to be able to register for it through all the same way we do with all the other rec programming, to be able to advertise for it. So this is something this is a conversation that needs to be had with Bill. And whoever we hire.
I think he'd be
needs
excited.
to be partnering with him.
I think it's a good chamber, you know.
There you go, feeling good, right?
Okay, so,
Good
do
night.
you have any others?
No, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay.
So what was the 4,000 for training?
Yeah, what's that?
Oh, that's more like you know, the YEO, you know, the stuff that we as
Oh,
elected.
so like a conference
Yeah,
that you
conference.
work
Yeah.
Are you budgeting, or do you have one in mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's
I'm only asking you,
Yeah, no,
because
there-
you're first on board.
yeah, no, there's several. There's YEO. There's
Got that one.
local progress. There's a series
Okay.
of stuff we get, you know, that offer us training.
So you said that 4,000 for the board.
No, that's for yourself, right?
But that's for myself.
That's for yourself,
Yeah,
it's 4,000.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
we were asked to do initiatives not for ourselves, we were asked to do initiatives that we're interested in having.
So what are we doing with the 100,000?
I am not in support as it is currently stated. That's for me, if you wanted an answer. As it's currently proposed, I'm not in support of 100,000. I'm in support of a much smaller amount as a test, or studying it a little bit further so we know what we're doing, because I just don't feel this is an adequate, for me. So I'm not in support as it is currently being brought to us.
I think it's a pretty big initiative, and we're a pretty big institution, although the Village of Ossining moves a little more swiftly than many municipal governments. I don't think we're ready to jump in with a $100,000 project that we haven't had a lot of understanding of how we would implement it or exactly how it would be implemented. But I think the fact that you brought it to us in this form is the only reason we got to have a public conversation about it, to get it started. And so that was the right thing to do, and I would like to understand it better. And I really see this as something that would be beneficial for our community. And I think the more effective way to do it is to find a community partner that is going to be leading that parade, that has more of a specialty in working with job training than is our expertise. But we should be in a role of helping make it happen. I don't know exactly.
Throw it out here, but, just dismiss it. I mean, you could put it in, tag it in contingency, and then if circumstances presented themselves that you wanted to go forward with some portion of it, at least you would have, an earmark for it. You wouldn't be putting yourself in the position of committing yourself to a budgetary item, but you could still set aside that money in contingency, and you could figure it out later on. I mean, I'd hate to see you just dismiss it now.
It's a way to get it acknowledged in the budget without
Yeah.
knowing exactly where we're going with that.
For more, so that might be the way to do it.
I like that.
And if we start it like later on, as you predict we might, the 100,000 really, if it's in June, it becomes 50,000, not 100, right? Because you don't pay for this.
Well, nothing comes out. It's like, you're just setting aside the money and saying, we have $12 million,
Right,
we
so
have
to
$12 million
learn more,
in
that's a good
contingency.
solution.
We could set aside $100,000 that we're feeling like we could spend.
That's a nice compromise, I don't know.
That's
So
how
What
I
does
would.
that do to the
Adding
budget?
100,000 to contingency, or you're taking out of the 3, you're earmarking 100 of that 300 potentially for this project?
Well, I mean,
Isn't
Remind us how much we spent out of contingency this year, because we just talked about it.
Like,
We put in,
like zero?
No, that's not true. It's like 100,000.
So right now, we're at 316, but then another 40,000 is supposed to be.
Dale, you have to speak in.
Dale, Tom can't
have
hear
to
you.
speak in-
Sorry.
It's also- it also-
Sorry,
that-
sorry,
your mic's
sorry.
not on.
We've taken 25,000 out so far. We're at 316.
We realize
Like
that the
40,
contingency is there
25.
for the unpredictables.
It's like
Right.
25, didn't you also
Lucky
take
this year?
40?
But now, yeah, we still
it's
need to do a
65.
budget adjustment if we are to cover the other 40,000. Plus, I think the boiler was 25, so,
But still, we have $200,000
Yeah.
that hasn't been touched.
right, basically. Yes.
So the board could, if we just earmark 100 out of the 3, that helps us, lowers this budget a little bit. But it also says that when that program becomes available, that the board can then make the decision on, spending that money at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's earmarked for that, and we'll be careful not to use that if we have other items for contingency.
We have to use it.
Be
then
mindful
we'll-
of
Yeah.
it, but that this
Be
was our
mindful.
intention.
So it could be funded out of 2018 contingency.
No, 2019.
2019 contingency, okay, gotcha.
Because it's just
just a roll.
it's basically, we're putting,
Right.
we're
Okay.
putting a statement into our budget that this is something that we value, and if it makes sense and we can make it happen, we have acknowledged that it is worthy of consideration.
Right, But somehow this has to come to the board.
It was gonna have,
We
yeah.
can't have the staff now spending, $50,000 of staff time to look into it because it's now in the
Yeah,
budget.
no, I got you,
It
yeah.
has to be brought in, and then once we see what's happening, could be great.
Yeah, okay. I can look at
All
that.
right, that works.
Okay.
That-
Good night, Trustee
It's-
Bazemore.
it's- it's-
Well, that's a nice solution.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
All right, where are we with our,
Next, or
additional
who's the
asks?
next biggest,
Rika.
Oh, you and I were the only ones. So I don't need to discuss each of this individually. Here's my thing, internships. Philosophically speaking, I believe that interns should be on stipend, not on salary. And I believe that they should all go to staff and not to board. So when I put it in, it wasn't for me. I put it in, and I did different departments that I'm familiar with, frankly, but it wouldn't bother me if you said, you know, I'd rather use this over here or that over there. So I'm giving you the macro.
Okay.
I believe in stipends. I spoke to Catherine Borgia about how some of the stipends are done for projects. I believe in beginning, middle, and ends. I would prefer that we get non-paying so that it's a part of a school and managed by staff. And what I did was I separated it into, it's not written the way I wrote it, okay. The building,
Right.
because of the code enforcement, I'd like them to have help. And I believe that all the things I put in for, if you want me to read them out for the public, let's see. Internship for the social media, I believe they're all learning opportunities. So I believe somebody working with Jamie, for example, I think this thing would have been a great project for a stipend, like a project. We want to do this, we want to have somebody work on the parking. Beginning, middle, end, managed by a full-time staff person, not as an assistant to them, but to actually learn something out of it, with like I think I put in $1,000 for each of these projects. So these are movable items, but these are the ones I thought would be most helpful in the areas that I think, like community center, where I envision like actual projects being able to be done where the person learned. Did I not put building?
No. Well, you have built,
Social media,
you have code enforcement,
Right.
building,
right,
permits and forms for code enforcement.
right.
So
Oh,
that's,
so that's an example of, I'd like, you know, how we
That's
always talk that we
18,000
want to
for-
re-envision how when people come and open a business
Yep.
and how there should be a list of all, I think that's a great learning and it's a good project, right,
then you have neat streets and social media.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, and again, it's a stipend of 1,000 each. And I think the landlord-tenant is not a stipend thing. The landlord-tenant is something we've actually discussed, that they need to get mediation training. We think, I mean, we're being charged by the county, that organization wants a fortune, but we think we can get some between honorariums and stuff about, something done for about $3,000 for those folks. That's what I put in. I don't know if it actually belongs as my request. I don't think I put, I wanted to go to Nikon was the only thing. I don't know what it costs, but that's the only one I
Okay.
want to go to. I
All
mean,
right.
that's the one I would like to. I didn't know how to budget for that,
Okay.
since I don't know what it costs.
And then you have landlord registration, 35,000.
Right, so I didn't know where that belonged, but we had talked as one of our 5 goals to have landlords, so it might be really more in your budget than mine, but we were asked for initiatives, so I didn't want that not to be addressed.
They're only here so that we can identify them as
Oh,
your
that's cool.
initiatives.
I like that you put it there.
Once you agree to what you want, then it'll
Right.
go to the appropriate
Right,
department.
no, that's cool. It has to be somewhere, might as well be here,
But what will
right?
they be doing for 35,000?
Well, I just think that because of ETPA, all of those units no longer are on the roster to be done for the registry that we had discussed.
Yeah, because there's going to be, there's no need to,
Because it's for the-
DHCR is already going to have a record.
That's
like
what
you-
they're supposed to
Yeah,
do.
exactly. So, I mean, it would be everybody else, essentially.
The other people that
Yeah,
we talked, so I
yeah.
reduced it to $35,000. You still have to interview the company, you may not like them.
Oh, wait.
This is your company one. Okay.
Oh, you're reducing the 140?
Of course we are, because half those buildings are ETPA building, you don't need
Right.
to do that.
Well, the
now.
majority of
Wait, did you actually reduce it in, was that
rental
in?
This
properties
is the
aren't
one.
in ETPA.
Oh, that's what I just
Yeah,
said.
we talking about, because we had put
Anymore.
$140,000
We
aside.
don't have to do that anymore. It shouldn't come out of the budget because it's being done as a part of ETPA.
No, I'm saying the majority of rental units in Austin are not part of ETPA. The majority are
That's a budget
regular
reduction.
market
I
rate,
didn't
regular
read that.
non-state regulated.
The ones we were looking at, actually, so we might have to look at that.
Okay.
I don't think so.
were you limiting to
Was it a planning
5
budget?
units or more?
Okay.
Well, he and I
3 minutes
disagree.
more?
I
It's not
think
there
it should be 10 over 10 units, so that's still a little bit of a, and since I put it in, you didn't put anything in, right, Quan?
No, because I didn't know that, I didn't know, in our previous conversation, I just thought we were gonna roll over the 140 from
Is that-
last year because
that
it
what we
wasn't,
did? I
because
didn't
it
see that.
wasn't,
Did you
no one
roll
spent it.
over? I don't think so.
Dale has spoken. Nope.
Could you roll it over from 2018? Because it wasn't spent?
Now we're adding it to the
Now you're
2019
adding
budget.
To the
Right.
budget. You're not
But
getting-
I
it-
looked
but
at
it
it,
ca-
it's not in there, so I put a placeholder in. And it's not
Oh.
gonna start till, they
It's
still.
not too late. It's not too late. That's what we're here for.
Oh.
We're deciding our
I
budget.
did not see it, therefore I put something
Gotcha,
in.
okay.
I looked at buildings, I believe, the way I would have liked it, it reduces all new, da.
Yeah,
I believe that there will be far fewer.
absolutely.
You and I don't agree on exactly the number of units, since I put it in, I put it in for what and I think the 35,000, since it will not start in the first quarter, because when they start. I did not see it, so I budgeted something for it. Thus, and again, it's not like a RECA thing.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
Right, okay,
Okay.
board initiative.
okay. It'll be fine.
Okay.
All right, so that was it, that was my explanation.
What's
of
the
what
building code
I had
enforcement
to-
audit study? 15,000?
Oh, that's,
Who's that?
that would be me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about that. That was a while ago, I just have to say. So Debbie and I had a conversation, and I felt it needed to be budgeted, and you guys can all disagree. I am in the same boat that I just sort of talked to you about. You can now throw that right back at me. Without doing any research, I think we need an efficiency expert in that department that's outside of the department. And I think that's like a consulting thing similar to what Tom did when I first started, where he wanted a group to come in. In his case, it's an audit. So I don't know the words to use, but I would like somebody to come in from the outside to look at the efficiencies of that department. You could all argue with me, that's fine, and I cannot honestly stay here and tell you that 15,000 is the right amount, the wrong amount, because I did not do very much research on it. I told Debbie that I was putting it in, but I have no idea if it's the right amount, so I sort of did do one of these. But I wanted there to be a placeholder that I believe that we need some outside consultancy on efficiency.
Mayor Garrity, can you, because I believe there was an audit done in 2014 by Pace. You might have been on the board at the time.
Sure.
Okay, so this is something, so not Pace.
That wasn't an audit though, like that. So
Ain't that,
Okay.
you're not using that.
Okay,
can I?
There,
No.
seen it?
okay,
No,
so
I happen to believe that
how much,
that particular exercise was engineered for a certain result.
okay, so how much did that cost though? Do we,
I have no
You're
idea.
asking about the
okay,
amount
yeah,
of
yeah,
money?
yeah.
My
just-
first year's trustee, I have no
Okay.
idea.
Can I just? I am so. First of all, I literally when we first actually ran together, I asked for an audit of that particular department, and it's been brought up. So I'm actually really happy that you said it. However, I think that the state has what they call a desk audit, and which goes into efficiencies. I'm pretty sure it's in the office of State Controller Denavili. So I would like to learn whether it could supplement, whether it's what we're all saying that we want more about efficiencies in particular, things that we want them to look into. But I know that the state does do a desk audit. I don't know if we qualify for it. We may be able to. But they do a whole report. They're external organization. They also, look into the finances. It's not just financial either. It's how you're operating as a department within a municipality. So I would definitely like to learn about that, and if it's the same thing being proposed tonight. Either or. I'm in support of having the state do it or having
I
a.
just want to change one word, so I'm not asking for an audit, okay? Audits are punitive, in my opinion, except in accounting world where they're actually, I would like an efficiency consultant to talk about improving from the customer perspective, what we do and how to improve it. Audits are very punitive at the end result. I am opposed to punitive metrics, philosophically, which is why I don't want a bureaucracy. I would like an individual or two to come in, run through what a customer experience is, look at that, and help the people who are on our staff do a better job, not point to what they don't do well. Okay, that's the difference that I am going for. I want it from a customer. How can we improve customer service? How can we improve efficiencies? How can we improve workflow? I am not arguing that the state may or may not do a great job, but I would eliminate that word because that is not my goal here. My goal is to help our staff do a better job from a customer perspective.
Thank you for clarifying.
These initiatives are being funded through fund balance?
No.
Oh, they were actually in the
They're
budget.
budget.
Oh, oh,
Oh, it is.
okay, yeah, that's what I
I
thought.
mean, we should do them just
Okay,
because,
okay.
yeah, but-
So,
Oh, you're right.
were you done, were you done?
That was, I wanted to just clarify.
The landlord registration,
Mm-hmm.
I would ask that we consider that, because when me and you talked initially, we had, we were talking about 250, and then we came down to 140. I would hate not to have enough money. I mean, I agree with you that there's gonna be, at least 1,800 units that won't have to be considered, but I just feel like, that from going to 140 to 35 is just, I would prefer that.
Anybody have a better number? Because neither of us knows the
Yeah,
real
yeah,
number as
exactly.
we're sitting, because neither of us did the
Yeah.
homework for this
Debbie.
particular ask.
This whole concept, whether it was 140,000 and exactly, we had conversations about this a year ago as one of the recommendations, and we did some of the other recommendations first, but you three actually moved forward pretty far with consideration of a path. And we expected that it would come back to us and we'd say, we're gonna take this path this way or not. We didn't get there. So can you just tell us what happened? Like, are you I know Rika and Quantel are recommending that we move forward with it and we fund it and we do it this year. From operationally, as a village manager, do you recommend it?
So the intent of the 140 to hire a company was to come in and do inspections of units as if they were doing a Section 8 inspection, housing and quality standards. Does this work? Does that work? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. The issue that we ran into is that they don't have a way in to the units. And we would have to go out and we'd be double doing it because we'd pay the company to go and do an inspection and only if the person would open the door. And then we would have to send code enforcement to do it if there was anything that was wrong.
Is that in addition to fire inspections?
What we did is we backpedaled a little and said, how many inspections do we need? How many are fire inspections? We put all the data together so that we could say, all right, in a given week, a code enforcement officer should be able to do these. So we went from being reactive to putting together a proactive program to get to those units ourselves in a systematic way. But that was one of the challenges for not hiring the company, is that we'd be spending money on something that we couldn't really affect.
So just to go back to the original recommendation, that is one of the reasons that this particular with the landlord registration and inspection was kind of coupled together, because first there had to be legislation to say that we were actually setting the standard here in the village of Ossining. But I do want to say that the fire inspection and a housing quality inspection is not the same thing at all. Like you're not, when you go into an apartment and you want to make sure that that the stove works, or that there's you're looking at the ceiling. I mean, your fire inspection is not necessarily doing that.
I understand,
Yeah.
but we don't legally have the right to enter a property unless it's for a fire inspection or a Section 8 house. I mean, we just can't walk into your house.
I would agree. I
allowed.
actually would agree with you, because because again, initially in the 5 recommendations, there was a proposal that there would be a landlord registration and an inspection. So without the legislation,
then this
then
means
it didn't
nothing.
it means nothing. So I definitely agree with that. But it's definitely possible to happen if we actually. Oh, you want to speak from there?
No, I was just, I was gonna walk out the room and say,
Good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome. Your name and address, please.
Thank you for joining us.
Deputy Mayor Codman, may I speak? So you're suggesting that we legislate first?
Yes, I've also that there would be that there has to be a legislation, because without the legislation, you have to set the standard, and the best way for you to set the standard is legislating.
And,
Right now
and,
it's
and we
useless.
have the ability, because I know that, I mean, the reason why it's so difficult to get into people's homes without cause is because of the U.S. Constitution. Like, you can't just enter people's homes. So we have the ability to establish a local law that would, that they would give the force of law to these
So,
these contractors to enter into
I
these
would say
professions?
absolutely, because, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we paid Jeff Smith to actually,
He was wrong. I mean, I wouldn't go by that, but go ahead.
yeah, listen, we don't have to go into particulars now. I mean, it's something that we can definitely raise next year with,
But if you want us to put between $35,000 and $100,000 into the budget for, I want to know if it's something that's
Yeah, we just
doable or
can't,
not.
like-
I'd like Stuart to give us a legal opinion just on the foundation for it to be possible. But this happens elsewhere. How could it not be
Yeah.
possible?
I mean, it does happen. So,
Right? I mean, these companies exist. They do this.
absolutely. I mean, we can go back and ask Stuart to do it, but again, my idea is that 35,000 is not enough. I mean,
So I think that,
wouldn't know.
that I would almost say that I think 35 is enough. Because as we set in motion what we've worked on over the last year, as far as being proactive and knowing exactly where we're going, we're in the process of hiring 2 more code enforcement officers, so, we'll be at full staff, and I'm really excited about that. I can't announce their names yet either, but, I think that you need to give the department time to work through the proactive, and what we can do is now we're measuring our statistics to see what we're getting done, and we can start to share that with you, and then where we're falling short, we can use the money to go and help us get that done. So I would support 35,000 for this year, because I think you're gonna see a lot more activity from our department as we move in this proactive method, which we haven't been doing yet.
It's not gonna start in the first quarter. I think it's
yeah.
about the
Right.
right amount. I think you start with a group, you see how it works. I think that's a reasonable
Yep.
storyline for taxpayers to say, look, we're gonna do this size buildings or this. We'll tell because the committee is involved in this. I think this is a reasonable ask. Maybe 50, I don't know, but maybe I went too low, I don't know. But it's not just a placeholder, but it's a reasonable ask for this year. And if we need more, because things are not working, at least the work is the foundation, and the work, as you've always said, if it's in the budget, it's then approach. And this is another, that's why I said you can give me a pushback against what I did before. So I think it's a good placeholder, it's a reasonable start, and if we need more because it's a great idea, I don't think that'll be a problem. But if we don't put something in, I think we're totally not addressing
And we
it.
can start providing statistics to the landlord-tenant committee, so they can see where we're meeting our needs, and then they can provide us feedback on what they're seeing as far as complaints and cases that they're handling.
And we have to go back to the committee now, right? Like, it's time to go back and say, where are we with this? Which is the next thing that has to be done. Anyway, that's what I put in.
So, okay. So are we comfortable with 35,000 for now? There's a lot of
Okay,
questions
yes,
still up in the air, and nothing's going to happen January 1st?
What, all I was just said, I'm comfortable with it, and all the other asks. I just wanted to just go back on one thing. The reason why I said, hold on, where are we?
Training?
Your stuff's not in there.
Audit was because it just said it on here, but thank you
I know.
for clarifying
No,
that,
no,
that it's
I'm
not.
actually saying to the village manager to
Yeah, we'll
please-
take audit
to
off.
please
Okay.
change that
Put
line.
efficiency.
Efficiency study.
But that was not my intention for what I paired it with, as far as what I said last time. But because I do feel that we need an actual audit that kind of covers overall operations. That obviously would be led by your office and personnel, but a state desk audit really. I think that the issues and challenges that we've had historically within the department are way beyond just customer service. So that was just my reasoning. That's all.
Well, I mean, we've recently experienced a visit from the comptroller where they studied back parking tickets. And that was prompted by questions from members of the public, and Tom DiNapoli's office, the comptroller, determined that it was worthy of investigation, and it's kind of interesting. They came up with recommendations that, no, there was actually a lot of interesting stuff. Some of the recommendations didn't seem to understand village government structure, so that was a little frustrating, but there was valuable information in. So if they, I assume it doesn't have to just be a disgruntled resident making a complaint to the comptroller, we could make a request and see if they found it as something that was, rose to the level of interest to them to come and do the study, right? Because they decide where they're gonna do the studies, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to learn about, even if it's still called the desk audit, or maybe it's not applicable to, to something like this. And if not, in addition to having a customer service type of study that looks into other areas and how to improve, how do we include the area that I'm talking about? So that's all.
So you wanted $8,000 worth of stuff. Do you want to tell us what that was?
Sure. So let me just pull up my notes.
I'm sorry, I didn't put it in here.
So my first item is $6,000 for paid interns. And that would be depending on the applicant, right? Because so my goal, as you know, is to have two start in the winter, which would be in January, and we're currently working with the school district. But the goal is that whether you're a student in the school district, whether you're a college student, or whether just a person who's in the workforce who wants opportunity to be an intern, that you'll be able to do so. So, that would kind of address the for credit and school component of it. If you fall into that, the paid, whether it's a stipend or the hourly. So it just gives us more options to really make sure that more people have access to actually applying for it. So that's why I chose $6,000 for that for the year.
So, but you're saying for Board of Trustee members?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you did a whole big thing
Yeah.
on that. Did you get applicants? Did
I-
anybody come and do it? Because I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, no. So I kept pushing the date back. I think that between the campaign and my three other hats, I kind of had to wait off. But I'm currently in process with Debbie in the school district to process all the applicants for this actually 2 months starting January. And you'll be seeing a lot of PR about it soon too. But the goal is to have at least 7 applicants, not just from the high school, but I'm happy that the majority of the interest is coming from juniors and seniors in high school. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So a question on that, if the interns that we have above are $1,000, are we assuming that each intern would be $1,000 here and you would be getting 6?
So I was assuming, depending on how I would do it is it's $1,000 a year tops per intern. But if you're a college student and you're allowed to do a stipend and you could work 6 months as part of your semester or 4 months, but to make it easier, I would probably say $1,000 per intern per year,
Okay.
which that would mean that if they're enrolled in public school, it would only be during the time that they're there. So January through June, right?
Wait, so does that mean, to her point, is that 6 interns for the year? That reports to whom? Who do they report to?
Myself and Debbie, as per the policy that we passed.
Why Debbie? She's staff. It would be for you. It's a board of trustees.
No, you asked who they would report to, and as per the
Who are they
policy,
working for?
myself. But the policy that we passed directs them to report to myself and Debbie.
Right, but they'll be working for you, 6 interns for the year.
Yes.
Okay. What else did you put in?
This one I don't think belongs as a trustee ask, but as you know, I'm currently working on drafting a language access policy, hopefully for next year for the board's consideration. But until we get to that, and the board hasn't even spoken about it, so I didn't, but there's no money in the budget for interpreters for next year. And I put $4,000, but I don't even know if that's enough for the year, or what the board wants to do as far as when we're going to actually be okay with paying for interpreters. So that's just something that I just had in there that I just had to say. My other 2 asks that are just as a trustee were $2,000 for the National NILEO conference, since we have a population of over 50% that is Latino. It's the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. It's an annual training to actually join the New York contingent. Keep in mind, I will hopefully get a scholarship for it, so those may not have to pay
How much
to
is
go.
that?
It's $2,000 in June.
Is it here in New York?
This one is in Arizona.
So it's 2,000 also include flights and hotels
Yeah,
and everything?
yeah, and I'm pretty sure when I apply for a scholarship, they'll give me either half or whole. They really want electeds to go. And the last one is YEO, which I forgot. And we also may actually get some funding for that. That is the National Young Elected Officials Network.
How young do you have to be?
It's 35 or under.
18,
Younger than me.
35.
So it's $6,000 paid interns, that, then $2,000 Naleo, and $1,000 I put for YEO. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, because again, you're asking for a budget line, but you know, you can.
I feel like it's
So.
too high, but
Can we just have a sort of a conversation generally about how much we're spending on trainings and conferences? Because I love trainings and
Yeah.
conferences, I really do. I have not expended all of what is in the mayor's budget this year, but there have been years when I've done a lot more, like the year that we all went to NICOM. I think we should have in the budget, everybody, what would it cost for the entire board to go to NICOM? And like, just to have that be a budget line, and I have my own budget line, so whatever, break out 1/5 of it for mine and 4 for the, and then I think it's totally reasonable for people to attend another big thing besides that, if you have the time to be able to dedicate to it. But, I mean, like, you put $4,000 in training for yourself, you put $2,000 in training for, $3,000 in training for yourself. I mean, so if all 5 of us are putting in, you know, $3,000 to $4,000 in training,
this is very specific though. So it's like we're, you know, so Naleo, I'm probably this entity should have been part of Naleo years ago, whether it's myself or other people.
well, but you're
or-
talking about, like, okay, so we pay membership
Yeah.
to a lot of organizations.
Correct.
Boom, fine, because that's gonna be some nominal fee, and then
Yeah.
the village can take advantage of whatever resources they have, and that. But we're talking about flying local elected officials to other parts of the country to attend conferences. That's a change, to my knowledge. I've not been aware of village taxpayers paying for that in the past. Maybe we want to, but I'm not aware that we've done that in the past. I mean, I attended something in Washington DC when I was a trustee-elect. It was great. I loved it. I did it because I wanted to be with young activists and learn how to be more effective. You know, I pay for a lot of stuff out of my campaign budget if it's
Yeah.
not directly related to my work as a trustee. So how much of this, and it's a perfectly appropriate expense for me as an elected official to use campaign money for some things. So the question is really a policy decision for us to all come up with. What do the taxpayers pay for when it comes to our training? This is on-the-job training. We all come in here with whatever our life skills are. From day one, we're always learning, and there's a lot of ways to learn. How much of that should be funded by the taxpayers? How much of that should be airfare to the Southwest for trainings? In this case, I'm just using that 'cause it's the example you gave us. There's cool trainings in the Northeast too that we could drive to, but there's still an expense with that, and you're still
Yeah.
paying for a hotel. So, you know, like, still, you're talking about $1,000 or $2,000 for any out-of-town overnight conference.
Yeah, I mean, typically, again, so most of the trainings, particularly YEO, definitely local private, these are trainings to help us do our job better. Like, we oftentimes we will come back with, whether it be legislation, whether it be, you know, different, you know, whether we're learning what Kingston did for their stormwater management fee. You know, the number I put is a placeholder. Do I see myself expending that kind of money? Probably not, because I work every day. So, like, I don't have, every time that I take off for a conference, that's the time that I'm actually taking off from my job. But I do think that there is a, you know, the same way that if we go to Hudson, Jesus, I can't think of the housing, the pattern for progress, right? Yes, we're a member, but if we go to, you know, another training that is an additional $500, I don't expect our campaigns to cover that. Because,
Absolutely,
you
but
know,
that's $500, and it's a day trip for 3 hours. I mean, see, that's the
Yeah,
thing. How
so-
much can you get out of? How much can you exhaust this region
Yeah.
before you need to then fly?
Well, I think so. Then to me, that's a different question because
Yeah.
you're not talking about where we're going, right? You're talking about where we stay.
Amount of money.
You know, the kind. So if it's
No,
if
it's
it's
a
a money
taxpayer
if,
dollar
yeah,
thing.
if it's a money thing, you know, if it's 500 to go from here to Newburgh or 500 to go from here
elsewhere.
to New Mexico, I mean, it's still
Yeah.
the same $500. But again,
It's just not $500 to go to Washington D.C. unless you're getting a scholarship or something,
yeah,
which is
but-
great.
Well,
So then let's do the, so what's the dollar amount that's appropriate? What should we be asking the taxpayers to pay on an annual basis for any elected official?
So you could do a dollar budget.
Yeah.
And if you get scholarships, that's great, and if you don't, that's one way of doing it. You get $500 to go on whatever, $1,000. If it costs less than that, great. If you have someplace to stay with a friend because you're in San Francisco and you have a friend there,
Right.
great. If it costs more, you have to pay for it, not the taxpayer. So one way to do it is a budget. I'm going to give you a philosophical problem I have with these requests. If I can't go to them, then they are exclusive. They are not open to every member of this board. Because I'm over 35, that organization and that conference excludes me. That is not fair. Things that the taxpayers pay for should be available to all elected officials sitting on this board. Excuse me,
okay.
the NAACP, I'm a member of the NAACP.
Yes, I know
right?
now, yep.
Okay, and I was for years before I moved here. They don't care, regardless of what they do and what they sound like. So the question is, if you go to a women's conference, do they allow men to go? Generally, yes, even if it's the women information, I mean, there's a couple of groups I belong to. But taxpayers paying for something that some of their representatives can go to and others. Now, if you told me that you don't have to be, what is the name of the organization?
Mayor?
So there's two. There's the National Association of Latino and
Right,
Appointed Elected
that one.
Officials.
So would I be able to go to that conference?
Knowing them, I'm gonna say yes, but pretty sure it's for elected officials and appointed officials that are Latino.
Right, so
But
therefore.
I don't think there's gonna be a Latino card, because if I showed up,
Yeah, like they're not gonna.
I'll be Dominican.
But may I tell you that I have belonged to organizations that are specific, that do not exclude who can go to them. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go to them. The question is, should taxpayers pay for it? So I will tell you that I had, for years, been involved in diversity at Chase, and when I went to a gay and lesbian organization whose mission is very specific, but in their conferences, you don't have to be gay, you don't have to prove anything. It was open to everybody that was available to them. This is tax dollars being used for something that is exclusive. It's been an issue legally when it comes to clubs, whether you can join all these different fraternal organizations. So I have an issue with that I would like to go to some of this stuff. If they exclude, if they don't exclude,
You can come with me.
So
I
Rick,
would actually like to do that.
Seriously.
But I don't want to spend taxpayer money on that
Rick,
level, but I don't think that they actually accept it, because.
I'll try to explain it to you this way.
Yeah.
The young adults at my church may do paint and praise, right, for the weekend, right? And so they'll bring in a artist.
Okay.
And yes, the young adults are doing it, right? But it's open to the whole church. So that means that if my grandmother wants to spend the $40 to do the paint and praise, she is more than she can do so because she has paid her money. I don't think any of these organizations that we're referring to exclude people. There are people who, of course, are not. Everybody there is not 35. There's a lady who's been going for years, who's, I'm not going to guess her age right now. So I don't really think that any of the conferences, whether I went up to Albany and did the Black Caucus, New York State Black Caucus, are they going to keep you out? Are they going to say, hey, Rika, you know what? You don't really look
The
African.
question whether they keep you out. The question is, are they exclusive or not? So
No.
there are age-oriented, lots of stuff that actually you cannot apply if you're over a certain age. Privately, sure, you could do that. If you work for an organization that wants to send you on it, that's great. Taxpayer dollars, public, that selected and elected representatives to represent them, using their tax dollars for something that is by its nature exclusive. And I don't care what kind of exclusive. It could be a Jewish organization that's exclusive. I don't particularly care. I'm just saying, not a comfortable feeling for me to be sending people on taxpayer dollars. So that's a philosophical issue. Money organizations, regardless of their name, are very happy to have all different people come in, right? This isn't actually what's happening here. So I actually have a different issue. Back to the budget issue, we could set a budget across this that says, $1,000. So if it's in Washington and San Francisco, in
Like
New York
all-inclusive?
City, $1,000 is a reasonable amount for training, and I'm assuming these are training conferences, but some of them are networking conferences, they're not all training. And
No, these are training,
no, these are
hardcore
actual-
pubs,
these are-
yeah.
no,
I
these-
said,
these
I'm
are
assuming
actually
that they're
training.
training conferences that you bring back and do stuff as you described. So then everybody has an equitable position of saying, that's the budget, you know? Stay at a hotel, stay with a friend, travel by train, travel by car, you know, it's up to you. So that's a budgetary issue. That's one way to go. I actually don't have an opinion on it. It just sounds like a heck of a lot of money, but
So what you're, so both things. I think it's very reasonable for us to say we want to make sure that any of the organizations that we are using taxpayer dollars to send any of us to, elected officials or frankly staff for that matter, but it would probably only come up with elected officials,
Yeah.
is not exclusionary.
Correct.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize because I actually don't agree with Trustee Levin's how she presented that.
Okay.
Simply
Yeah, she
because
alleged.
if I went to the Black Elected Officials Millennial Conference, right, and I bring back a policy, I am not bringing back the Black Millennial policy that's only going to affect Black millennials here in the village of Ossining. I mean, the goal is to get trained. Now, however they choose to give you policy decisions, those policy decisions are not going to be solely based on the Black millennials of Ossining, but they're going to be a policy that's going to affect all 25,000 people here in this organization. So I kind of want to say
oh,
that.
that's a great point. And that's a question of whether that's really what happens, but that's a great point. But I'm simply saying that I can't go to this as an elected official, elected by the same public that elected you.
Well, we just clarified earlier that you can.
No, you think I can. It's not what it says when you go to these things. So I don't want to get into this. I'm telling you
I will
why
tell you, I
think
just looked at one today that is for LGBTQ elected officials and trying to develop the pipeline. There are pieces of their conference that say invite only. They're exclusively for gay elected officials. That is like 1/5 of a day. So it would still be worth sending somebody who wanted to learn what were the concerns of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
They just would miss out on the breakfast. Then they would go on to the breakout sessions or something. It's, I
Yeah,
don't,
but
I
even-
don't think
even-
that's actually like, I don't know if there's a legal reason for us to not do that, and Stuart should check on that, but I don't think they're going to be explicitly exclusionary because they probably all would get sued, wouldn't they?
clubs don't.
Don't-
Well, this is not.
Well, I mean, these are,
Fraternal
you know, obviously, they're already,
Said no.
the different government elected officials and/or their staff. So you do see a lot of city managers go, you see attorneys go. I mean, it's nothing new. However, even NICOM, even Department of State here in New York, when they have trainings, they have parts in their program where it's only for managers, and it's only for mayors, and it's only for first-time electeds, and there's only, you know, and, you know, it really depends on the intent and purpose. You know, they aren't clubs, they aren't nonprofits. You know, a lot of them are the reason why they're all national is because they're, especially these two, they're the only ones in the country that bring, like you said, you know, a particular group when it comes to learning how to develop policy or serve your community better to help all of your community when you come back. I mean, that's like the goals of, you know.
And I think there's actually great benefit to it. I love
You know.
going to League of Women Voters and being in a room with all aspiring women who want to run for office. That's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
That's like a room I never get to be in, but like once a year. It's lovely. So, you know, I'm not against it.
Objection to these type of things. I'm also objected to fraternal organization that keep women out and other people. So for elected officials.
Tom, can't hear you.
For elected officials, I'm strictly speaking for elected officials. So budgets, what do you want to do with budgets?
So what would be
There
a
were two issues here.
reasonable, so the ask is from a budgetary perspective, what is a reasonable amount for I think NICOM is its own thing.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
a
I don't
NICOM
think any of
line,
us went last year.
we haven't gone since 2015,
Right, that was-
16, right, your first
Yeah,
year?
2016.
So we
You and
went,
I were together on the
Yeah.
first year, and that was
Yeah.
very planned, that we said we won't go every year, that we will rotate.
right,
or-
but
Well,
now
depending
it's
if
been
you're
a
in
couple of
office and who's on the
years.
board,
Well,
but yeah.
if you're new, it was the
Oh,
exception.
okay.
Right.
So there's $2,250 then for NICOM, so you don't have to worry
But
about.
is that, no, but is that NICOM attending the conference, or is that our, because there's an annual fee just for membership that might be
Yeah, that's
1,000.
attending a conference.
Oh, cool.
That covers,
So
That, but who does that cover?
that covers
That's under the
hotel
board's
and.
budget.
that
Well,
covers
that's
everything?
not gonna cover hotel if you're gonna be spending the night, but
Well, I mean, the NICOM, it's in Saratoga
It's in
Springs,
Saratoga
it's like
Springs.
2 nights. Yeah, so let's find out what we spent, and that's an actual number from 2016.
Oh, actuals is 6,730 for professional dues. and-
Actually, in 2016, on page
Yeah,
315, it shows that in 2016, the trustees line was charged $2,519.
Right.
So that
And
seems to
in
be,
23, 58, and 17, it was bumped up to 10,000, but that's because of the MOA dinner. And now it's back down to,
No, no,
I'm
no.
sorry,
We
I
did
don't
not
think we're
go-
looking at the right
no.
number here.
what page are you on?
Oh, no, I'm looking at page 3 of 15, the $25,816. Where's the number that you got for what you think was the NICOM conference?
the very first
2030.
column that says 2016 actual, if you come down to the professional dues and meetings line, there's an amount there, 2005-1955.
In 2016, actual.
Which is the last time we went.
But then why was the actual nearly that the following year? Because we didn't all go to Saratoga.
So
I don't think this is
I don't think we
Saratoga.
actually had a policy. I think
No, we just went.
We just went, and then the following year there was a conversation about.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
We
well,
all said we
yeah,
don't need to go
yeah,
every year and let's accept it.
No, I think because I think the following year it was like, are we going? Then when it
didn't
wasn't
work.
like
Some
a
of us
really
could,
like
some of us
yeah,
couldn't,
some
whatever.
of us couldn't go.
But
So
we basically didn't go.
I don't, because it was like 4 board members, you, Lori Lee, and Abe. We went like 7 of us went.
Right, but this was just a portion that got charged, this is just a portion that was attributable to the trustees.
Is there a
I
mayor's
ha-
line?
I
too?
had-
Yeah, but that was like 2 hotel nights for 4 trustees and whatever the conference was. Then that's a darn good rate. Okay.
So I agree with you. We need to figure out. We need to give a better ballpark number because
That's saying $500
So here's the
each.
thing.
No.
You could go to a conference but not go to NICOM.
$600
If we
each.
did like a budget issue, like if we just said, this is the training per, then trustees could choose, I'll go to this one conference that costs.
So I think, but I think
The
NICOM.
benefit of NICOM going together is that it's almost like a retreat for us.
Absolutely.
And we were like constantly sharing
I have to say, that was
information.
really productive.
Yeah.
And we go to dinner together. We all say, well, what did you go to? And like,
We
I
actually
would,
did learn from each other, actually talking
that would
about
be
the
like
classes.
the
We're gonna
most
need-
valuable thing we could probably do as this board. Should have done last year.
That'd be a treat.
Okay, where are we coming out?
All right, so I
Because-
think outside of NICOM, I think $1,000 is too low for like individual.
I mean, the reason why,
You think you'll get scholarships, though?
yeah, I mean, so the one that I just went to was a fully scholarship, which is great. You know, I always try to make sure that I could do that first, and that's any age at most conferences if you apply. But the reason I don't pick conferences that are in California because I want to be in Palm Tree. They're not these particular ones, especially NALEO. There's no other conferences in the whole country like it. That's why you get almost all 50 states to go to once a year. That actually, so YEO, it's the only one that's like, co-sponsored by every level of government, and the majority of policy that gets discussed actually dictates what happens in Congress the next year and what happens in local municipalities. So it's not.
Whether it be local progress. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for
It
each
should be
person,
about local
yeah, no, the organization was called Local Progress. So listen, I think realistically speaking, and again, it really depends on whether there's a scholarship. But I personally, if there's $3,000 for each trustee, I mean, I don't think that he just named a $2,000 conference. I don't think that that those lines are going to be expended. I think it's like the green bikes. We put a number down. We put a number down, and let's actually see what those numbers look like for next year.
So you want to do 3,000 for each of you as a budget item, and is that what you're saying, the rest of us?
And then NICOM is
Well, NICOM sounds
Separate,
like
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
separate thing, because it's
Yeah.
also an opportunity for us, as the
absolutely,
trustees.
absolutely.
Thoughts?
I think that's too high. I think that's too much to ask for the taxpayers. I don't think, and we don't put things in the budget, because the things we put in the budget, we have to raise taxes to pay for.
So these technically can be, are these considered one-time expenses, or?
The
Yeah.
mayor's budget has 1,500 for professional dues and meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be increased too.
She's not asking for it to be.
Well, because for me, like, there's all kinds of great women's things local, there's all kinds of great land use things local. I go to PACE stuff, I'm going to one in like, 5 weeks at PACE, their annual thing, it's great, like, Eleanor's Legacy does great stuff. I mean, some of that's campaigns, like,
yeah.
there's League of Women Voters stuff is great, like, I got a family, I'm not gonna travel out west and be gone for, like, going to NICOM, that's like a huge commitment, I'm taking away from, like, I care for 3 people if I count my husband, like, every single day. So going away for days at a time is not something that works with my life. So I love trainings, I love conferences, but I'm not gonna leave town to do it if I
So
don't
we're
have.
Right,
to.
for
I don't
those
need
reasons
one.
for you,
We're down
yeah.
to,
Yeah.
right, we're down to.
So
like,
maybe there shouldn't be a
dollars
flat
and
number.
cents now. Any other, I'm actually, is this something you're gonna do every year? Or somebody needs to go to every year?
So the thing is, you don't have to go to it every year. It's not like an operational expense.
Right,
Like,
a
so
recurring.
these are things, like, to me, this particular training it'd be like some of these programs we named. Any of these programs that we're doing, whether it be an after-school program, they come at a fund balance. They can be axed out any time, right? And so I think if we're talking about the funding source, if it could come at a fund balance, absolutely. But I don't think it's something. You don't have to go. No one has to go to anything, right? And like I said, for me personally, the job I have, I can't. Every time I take off for a conference, that's my personal vacation day.
We all, I mean,
Yeah,
think
you know,
about
I think
it.
most
So
of us
I'm gonna, I just,
for the time. Ooh,
for me-
oh God, wait, is that the
How
real
about
time?
okay.
1,500
Pretend it's not.
per person, 4 at 1,500, and then maybe somebody uses some extra and some uses less, and if you go over, we'll figure out where we take it from.
It also sounds like, I mean, these conferences do have a lot of scholarships. So what it does is it
I mean,
puts the
I can't
onus on
guarantee
us.
it, but yeah.
You can't, but it puts the onus on each individual to figure it out in advance, apply for the scholarships as much in advance. And if something comes up that's beyond the 1,500, and we say, this is incredibly valued, this is so on target for what we need to do, we'd like to borrow from contingency to be able to pay, to send one of us to do this because they're going to bring back something that's so valuable to the community, then I think we'd all be amenable to that.
So can I'd like, can I just say, can we live with $2,000?
Yes.
each? Can we
Yes,
just get that?
absolutely.
Can you promise to come back, you'll do a report about what we did, you'll say whether you want to go again, whether it's worth going in. I went to Nikon once, I said, once was good, I don't need to do it next year.
I don't need to
And
go to
that way
Nikon.
you can come, oh, I'm looking at him right now. That way you come back, it says why there's local, whatever, the whole idea is you're supposed to bring it back. Maybe I'll look at some stuff. I'm not gonna ask, for money for myself except, for the NICOM thing, because I can't take any more vacation, to be honest with you. So I think from a total point of view, I would be okay with lowering it to $2,000 each, if we could agree to that.
Okay.
And then you'll tell us, I would like you to ask though, and see if there are other people. I have gone to, a huge number of Hispanic, because I ran diversity for Chase. I haven't been on this job, but I actually would like to go to some of these things, but more local. I don't want to.
So wait, were you saying 2,000
There's a
for just the
limit.
2 of them because they're asking for it, and then,
I think she was saying.
That asked for it, yeah.
okay, so,
Oh, she wasn't. I thought.
2 times 4.
I
is what
thought.
was-
Yeah, that's what I thought.
2 times 4 for the board.
Oh, I wasn't doing
for the
that, but
trustees,
yeah.
because you guys are your own line.
Yeah.
But you're saying you don't want 2,000?
I don't, no, I would say 2,000 for each of them. They asked for it. I'm not spending taxpayer money if I don't need to. I mean, why would I do that? I already put in what I want to go to. If you
John, you're
need
not
to go
looking to go
something-
anywhere next year, obviously, because you're not going to be on the board, but do you have?
I have a different conference for you.
You've been on the board for 7 years. What seems reasonable to you?
1,500 seems to be the number I'm
Per person?
coming up with.
Okay.
I mean, that's what's in the mayor's budget now, so.
That's just for me.
Because
but
of
he said-
her
Yeah, but I'm
person.
saying it should be the
Oh,
same for everybody.
Yeah.
He's saying it should be the same for
It just should be the same for everybody, just make it even across the board. If that's what you have, if you get for that, then everybody else gets the same number.
I actually pay for things that other people wouldn't have to pay for, but I guess if there's going to be really active trustees that,
I mean, I don't object to the $2,000 either. I mean, we're kind of going around on this. I mean, I
So let's
understand,
do two, I mean.
the notion of, at the end of the day, when you amortize all the hours we put into this job, you know, we're making like $1 an hour here. So, you know, but, you know, at the, or less. But at the end of the day, you know, these are opportunities for trustees to go to these events and learn from other elected officials and learn about what's happening in other parts of the world. And those are all important experiences that they're going to bring back. And listen, I hear your point. Well, yeah, you know, you probably wouldn't want to go to a Latin elected thing. Well, you know, that's your choice not to do that.
No, that's not what she was saying. She was saying.
If she wanted
She was
to,
saying it's kind of the
That's what I
opposite,
said.
yeah.
No, I said, I don't think I can.
Well, then
That's a different
then that's your
But that's not
circumstance.
even like.
It's
what
the
we
unproven
discussed.
allegation yet. We don't know yet.
An allocation, I'm not discussing
Okay.
that point.
Okay, fine.
We're just down, you're at less than I am, I'm okay with 2, you don't, I mean, just let's,
2.
2 is fine.
I went higher.
Well,
than
make
you.
mine two,
You should.
Yeah.
So I agree with
Now,
that.
you guys are making me feel like I should be doing more, so I'm gonna like fill my calendar, okay.
I am not using the money, so it's 3 times 2. The issue will be that when trustee Quesada comes in,
I think you
we're
should
not
do it.
allocating anything for him because he's not sitting here.
No, I think
Then I
That's a
will
different
advocate for trustee Quesada, and he can either
The whole
choose to
board.
spend the
the
money
whole
or
board.
not.
I just
whole
think
board.
it's-
Fine. Fine, I'm just not.
I was gonna put in 4.
Okay.
4 at 2,000, 8,000 for the board and 2,000 up yours to 2,000.
And then people could choose to spend the money.
Everybody
they
has
can choose.
2,000
Well,
for,
hopefully you guys will also get
training and-
scholarships, so the taxpayers sit there.
Right,
go, yay,
and then we can,
We're done.
we can say, oh, look at all this
Right.
money we have left over, let's
That's
go
fine.
fund my
Okay.
next after-school program with our unexpended funds from training.
so
Okay.
just to recap though, we're putting 6,000 in for the paid interns for the Board of
Oh,
Trustees?
I actually said that I object to trustees having interns, 6 or any, and I actually think it's unrealistic to have a job that doesn't even have hours assigned to it, regardless of how you assign it yourself, to have 6 interns assigned to a person. I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers. So I actually did say that I'm not in support, I'm in support of only for staff, not for the trustees. But if you were to push me, I'd say 1 intern, we'll see how that goes, and then, again, the interns I asked for are not for
I
trustees.
understand.
What
So
happened,
that's my
I just
opinion.
wanted clarification.
Oh, you're going back because.
what
we
happened to
finished-
credit for interns?
Well, yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, this gives the freedom to hire anyone who really is either a student per credit, which is at a high school or at a accredited college or university, or it gives the opportunity to pay a college student or a high school student. So, you know, we may have a high school student who can do it by credit, but I mean, this also goes into my philosophy about free work. You know, so it's a little deeper for me as far as, I mean, I like to pay whenever I can. It is a structured program, so like when I hire the first one that we're going to soon, it will be done with the school district. We'll have tasks, we'll have hours. They have to do like a capstone project. That's what they did. So, you know, it is very accountable to, you know, to the public. As far as the philosophy about elected officials not having interns, that's okay. I mean, not everyone has to agree with that. We are considered employees of the people of Ossining, so I just don't agree with that. But it's not a new concept. And I would like to, you know, I think here really, especially because we're also busy with work and family and leading our town and our community, any way to supplement what you do and better serve your constituents is an opportunity to take. So, and for me to continue practicing what I'm trying to preach about, including more young people, I already know that most young people in Austin can't even afford to live here or eat here. So, you know, it is important to get paid.
If they're in the capstone, I don't think you can pay them, right?
You can.
Not if they're getting, if it's a school project, you can't pay
That's not true.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a number.
Okay.
6,000 seems high. 6 interns seems excessive, and some of them will get credit. I don't mean, I don't, so like, I think that's a high number of interns to take on during a year, especially the first year that it would really be implemented. And some of them are going to be doing it for credit and will want to do it for
Yeah.
credit. That's more valuable. A college credit is way more than $1,000.
It's late.
Sort of like we were talking about I don't know what we were talking about some line item earlier this in our meetings where you were like, Quanta, do you really care how they get the money? Can we just put a budget number and then
Yeah.
maybe and possibly set up a policy so that there can be like a standard, like if we are going to have village interns for electeds, right, then next year we can actually set a policy about how that money is split up. Like we could just
Yeah.
So
instead
what
of
would
us,
be your number?
if it is 6, I mean, is this just 6 for you or 6 for the board?
So this would be 6 for me, but obviously the I like your suggestion of having a standard, because we already have a policy for interns in general. I just brought it up this time for budget season to have us have the ability to pay our interns.
So could we say, I mean, honestly, I don't plan on having an intern, but if would you have a problem with us putting a budget number, right? You know, possibly allocating, like that's the number, and then as far as
I wouldn't.
how many, you know, we could come up with some kind of policy of how interns, you know, get paid. And would you have a problem that if Victoria wanted an intern out of that $6,000 budget line, that she could do that, or if
The
trustee?
thing is, we're talking about like $1,000 at a time.
Yeah.
It is, I understand, you want to have something in the budget line that identifies it, and, I mean, the $1,000 is the amount that Rika was suggesting for the short-term internships that, for the staff, so that seems like sort of the number we're latching onto. So why don't we say like 2,000, and then, maybe you'll have 2 interns, maybe you'll have 6 interns, but, you know, some of them are gonna do it for credit, you
Right,
know?
right.
So like, then you have a line in the budget, it's $2,000. If it's going, you know, gangbusters, you got so many of them, and it's reasonable to pay them each $1,000, they're not doing it for credit, then we'll be able to find another $1,000 in the contingency.
So,
2 people.
so 2 people, so you
I
wanna
think
put-
that's what,
I would, I just believe it a little. I would rather see, there's 5 members, right?
what, you mean us? I don't want one.
Yeah, I don't want.
So stop selling like ice to the Eskimos.
Okay,
Don't
so,
want it.
okay. So
Doesn't
let's
want
put-
it.
let's-
You just said you didn't want
I
it.
don't even know if you're gonna have one, so come on.
Can we just can we live with 3?
No, fine.
Okay, there we go.
Moving on, it's too late. There you go.
This is, y'all messing me up, because I said we were gonna
So
be
this is 3 for anybody.
We haven't even done the finance office yet.
This is 3 for anybody.
This should have been done on November 14th
So,
at our
Mr.
work
Bismore,
session.
3 for myself or 3 for the board? Okay,
But nobody else wants them over.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about.
all right.
Okay, so may come in.
I'll take it.
Have you met him?
I'm sorry.
You're right,
But
we're
you have
making
to
our
open-
presumptions, yes.
I think he's making the point that it should be available to everybody.
Yes,
We
you're right.
realistically don't
I might
think-
change my mind.
You might be so successful at this, we'll all want them.
Yeah,
Next,
okay.
Okay.
what else is on the lists?
We're done with the trustees' lines. My lines are fine. I don't need anything special, except I just got more money in my training. I gotta go and sign up for some conferences.
The only part, now that we addressed the interns and the conferences training, was the interpreter question.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad you reminded us of that. Okay. I would
in the
really
budget
like to know, have you ever asked the schools or did any research? Because their headphones are a good system. Like, they use that a lot, those headphones. We've borrowed them. We borrowed them the night of the debate. Nobody used them.
What was
We didn't
the
really
amount?
promote it, but
For interpreters that we paid?
People used them for.
Public hearing?
did they? Okay, good. I mean, in the schools, they use them all the time. I never go to a big meeting in a school that doesn't have an interpreter working.
Oh, you don't know what the number is?
What the
You didn't
rates
budget for
are?
it. Okay.
Or like, what are we paying for? Are we paying for a person, are we paying for a system, like actual
You'd have to buy the
machine?
system, but then you have to pay a person to speak into a microphone.
Do you know how much we paid for the interpreter that we hired for the public hearing?
It's like a cord interpreter. It's expensive.
Yeah,
Okay.
See, that's one of the things about the schools. They just have staff members that part of their job is being bilingual.
The court actually has somebody too, and they just pay her a little bit more. It's not a full salary, though. It's a
Right.
little bit when she's needed. Although, I think in the traffic, she's needed all the time.
$400 is what we paid him.
For one board meeting?
For hearing, right, yeah.
So,
That doesn't
I-
include the
I-
equipment.
I would like to know what the equipment is, because the school has been very generous and helpful when they can be, but, you know, there's a lot of nights where they're using it for their meetings, and it's their equipment. Like, they probably have their own conflict in different schools,
So
so,
we don't know what the
So
number
can we,
is.
can we, do you want to research or not? Because, let me just say my philosophy on this is that if we are saying that we want to be a community where at any given time, you know, if we have Spanish speakers or whether they be Portuguese or Italian, whatever, however we want to work that out, I would imagine Spanish, because that's primarily the other language that we have here in this community. It needs to be Like, we need to.
You're in the budget
It
somehow.
needs to be, not only does it need to be in the budget, but we need to understand that that's the way we're doing business now, like going forward.
So let me ask you this. Will people that speak a different language come to the board meeting to sit in attendance in the audience, waiting for an interpreter to tell them, or will they watch the video afterwards? And the reason I ask you that is that the new program that we're looking at, when you replay it, it translates it on the bottom into any language.
YouTube does that too. We could do it right now. So, I mean, so at home,
Right.
on television, you can do SAP, on UCOM, on YouTube, you can do it,
Okay.
so we, I mean, it's not a perfect translation, but
but
it's
it's-
functional, and it's there, and it exists. The technology is there.
Okay.
The only thing we really don't have, well, besides some pieces of the website that are PDFs and stuff, but is in-person access. So the in-person access is an expense for equipment and an expense for the translator, and then it's a policy question of, do we have the person there all the time? Do we have the person there when there's just a public
Honestly,
hearing? I
90% of
mean,
meetings,
the-
there's
I would have them-
Any languages, nobody there.
I would have them like mainly at like, I mean, we're gonna have to, even though Ossiting's been a community that's had a population that speaks a big part of the population not understand, and I don't want to assume for everyone, but we're gonna have to retrain the community to how this works, because now we're asking them that they can understand. So if we get new equipment, or it's gonna take time for people to actually know that. I mean, we're gonna have to do work. We're gonna actually have to reach out to the community. We're gonna have to actually do some education about why we want them to actually come to meetings.
how about this? Can we put $5,000 in the budget for language access and figure it out next year?
I was gonna say 10.
And
Okay, fine.
10. There we
agreed.
go.
I don't know what the hell we're doing with $10,000.
I don't, listen.
I think we can buy all the
I just wanna
equipment
have
for
it.
less than 5.
agreed. I just wanted to have something in the budget, and then us figure out what that
Yeah, because
would be.
this is a long conversation.
Then why do we have to do 10? Why don't we just do 5? We're earmarking. What the hell are we buying with $10,000? We just said we have all the technology we needed.
Yeah, where are you getting
Well-
the number from?
Still have to
Oh, I
raise the
will-
taxes for this
Well,
stuff.
this-
No, you don't. Why can't it?
So we could put $5,000 in and then do the homework. And then if it comes back, what we're gonna be asking you for is to spend our PEG money for this anyway, because
Okay.
it's access.
Then whatever you want.
10, yeah.
10 is good. Peg money. There you go. Peg money. There we go.
Peg money is big, man.
So that'll
Peg
go-
money. Yes,
that'll
that's
be
not
on the
taxpayer dollars
capital
at
plan.
all.
That's a big
Yes,
number.
Okay,
10,000.
but we're gonna put that on the capital plan, because PEG money would go on the capital.
Super.
That's equipment, yeah.
Oh, but that's just for the equipment.
It is for the equipment.
That's not for the translator.
No.
Okay,
Then we're getting great equipment.
yeah.
No, I mean,
Then put 3,000 in for language access that cannot be PEG money, because we're gonna have some
Right.
human resources for that.
Okay.
And put 7,000 in for PEG money, whatever that means in this case. I don't think it's gonna be
I'm gonna
7,000.
put it under the clerk's budget, because that would be
Perfect.
interpretation.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, perfect.